David's my real estate attorney. We've known each other going on over 20 years. We played high school football against each other, actually. We didn't know it back then, but we found out later that we had played against each other. And David focuses all of his time now on primarily real estate law. He does some wills and trusts and some other family planning and stuff like that, but is working a lot with real estate investors to develop their investing plan as far as their entity structuring, their C Corps, S Corps, LLCs. David does all my notes and mortgages. If you guys are in any of our training programs and see the examples of notes and mortgages and mortgage releases that we've put together, payoff letters, all that's come from him. I think you're good. You're on the mic.
I'm good.
You got the group?
Yep.
All right, give David Streeter a round of applause, please. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Well, today you can see it's entity structures for real estate investors. And like Josh said, my focus is primarily on the transactional side of real estate law, and with that goes hand in hand is business organization. So I'll start it off here. But before I get into limited liability companies or that seems to be the hot topic. There are various types of business entities that you can consider when you're starting to invest in real estate or any business. The first one is a sole proprietor. And people think, oh, I have a sole proprietor, I'm good to go, I have a business. Well, essentially, a sole proprietor is not really a separate legal entity. And when I talk to people, I can tell right away how sophisticated they are, or if they have a lot of misconceptions about what it means to go into business for themselves. So when you're a sole proprietor, essentially, that's an extension of yourself. Any profits you make from that business get reported directly to you. You're also 100%, liable for any of the debts, the liabilities, any causes of actions that come against you. You have no protection there. So if you may be doing something in your business, you might have a lawsuit. Someone sues you, gets a judgment. Now all of a sudden they can place a lien against your house, garnish your wages from quote-unquote day job if you don't invest, full-time, things like that. The other thing is people sometimes go, I have a partner, I have a partnership. Well, partnerships are just like sole proprietors. They're not really going to provide you with a whole lot of liability protection. Some states have limited partnerships, but if you have a partnership, there's always going to be at least one general partner, and that person is always still going to be personally liable. Some people say, well, I have a limited partnership, so I'm good. And when I kind of look at the documents, it doesn't take me very long to figure out that that person that I'm talking to is actually acting as the general partner, even though they haven't coined themselves or titled themselves that. And I'm like, well, you have no liability protection here. You're still 100% responsible for whatever this business does. So then the people, over time said, okay, I want the liability protection. So for over a century, for, as long as people have been creating businesses, corporations. So with a corporation, that's what everyone wanted, and there was a C corporation. And the cool thing with this entity is that it does give you that liability protection. You're only responsible, or your risk is limited to the amount you have invested into that business. Now with corporations, if you're an owner of that, you could have one owner, you could have 1,000 owners. In public companies, you sell shares of stock. And that's what your investment's limited to. And you're not personally liable for the acts of that business unless you commit fraud or commingle funds or things like that. But the problem with corporations is you get double taxed. So any of the income that you make into the corporation on a federal level, you have to pay taxation on. And then if you take distributions, dividends, or whatever, you get taxed on that money again. So $100,000 come in, you pay tax, pay your expenses, a little bit goes out to you, you're paying tax on two levels. So then they came up and said, okay, this is all constantly evolving over the last 150 years. We're going to create an S Corp. So S corporations, this is where people a lot of times think, I need to create an S corporation. An S corporation is just the election status you make with the IRS. It's not separate, it's separate and distinct legal entity. Like in the state of Ohio where I'm at, I don't file an S Corp. If someone wants a corporation, I file a corporation. Then we go to the IRS, get the tax ID, and we can take an S Corp election. And basically, that just means that that entity is passing through like a sole proprietor, so you're avoiding that double taxation. But there are a lot of restrictions in that go along with corporations. They have the limited liability company, which came about in the 70s in Wyoming, and Wyoming was the first state to have them. And then not a whole lot of states have had it. Then in the 90s became mainstream. So pretty much every state has some sort of limited liability structure, and it's a hybrid between the partnership or sole proprietor and the corporate protection. So you get a lot of the tax benefits that you get from the partnerships and the sole proprietors, but you get the liability protection that a corporation gives you. It passes through, and even if you want to, from a high level, from taxes, You can even take an S Corp election through an LLC, a limited liability company. So the reason you need to choose a business entity, and I've touched on some of these, is tax considerations. And I'm going to go through some of this quickly. I do want to leave time for some questions because that's how I really, love to interact. I went through the pass-through entity versus double taxation. When you have a business entity, all the expenses get written off of the gross, and you end up getting a net on a profit and loss sheet. So there are tax reasons you do that. You can choose how you pay your employees, W-2 employees or 1099 contractors. Everyone loves 1099 contractors because they don't have to do state withholdings and federal, employee withholdings and things like that. But you have to be careful. Where I'm from, the state is really cracking down on people who pay and have independent contractors. I mean, really cracking down. And essentially an independent contractor, at the end of the day, they can come and go as they please. If you expect them to be on the job in a desk from 9 to 5, following up on call sheets, so that they're an employee, and you need to give them a W-2. And that's just the cost of doing business. The non-tax considerations for doing this is liability protection, which we touched on briefly in the previous slide, management structure. You can go ahead and create, your chain of command. You can designate someone as a president. You can create a board of directors. You have percentage ownership. You can decide if it's a corporation or even a LLC, who owns what and how much, and that can change over time. And then it also gives you the ability to diversify from the investment standpoint between different projects. Sometimes you can hold many properties in one LLC, but there may be reasons why you diversify and create, other ones. So my preference obviously is LLCs, but the type of entity that you ultimately choose can be dependent on various circumstances. So you always want to consult, whether a tax professional or an attorney to figure out what your, legal structure is going to be. The reason I like LLCs is they're so easy to manage. You can change them. You can start with something simple, but as your business grows and develops, you can add pieces on. If you need to bring in money partners, you can easily transfer units. You can document everything, and it's not that complicated. Whereas in the corporate world, you have shares of stock, you have strong SEC regulations, which you still do with sale of units and LLCs. But the cool thing is also, since it's new, generally speaking, from the mid-90s after, so 20 years old, there's not any case law. There's not a uniform commercial code regarding the limited liability company. So there's a lot open to interpretation. So you can do a lot. And I always tell people, you got to do what you do that's in the best interest of your business. Don't commit fraud. Don't do something illegal. Make sure that you have a good faith basis for what you're doing and be able to support it and document it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay.